For the last 14 years, I've been trying to make a documentary about my father, and I've never been able to finish it. Last week, my father died, and I finished it in a week. And it's pretty clear to me now that the reason I couldn't finish it is because I didn't want him to see it. So here's the documentary that I've never let anyone see.
Before I tell you about my father, I feel compelled to emphasize that my father's dying. I don't mean right away, he's in good health now, but I've noticed despite everyone's best efforts, everyone eventually dies. Even all the people that Jesus healed are all dead now. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting that Jesus' healing was a waste of time. I'm just saying we're all dying whether we want to admit it or not.
That was me, 14 years ago. I was trying to make a documentary. Problem was, I was young, and I didn't even like documentaries. So I decided that I, Mark Arnett, would invent an entirely new type of documentary. A documentary that I would like, that was really all about me. The results are a little embarrassing.
My father was born in 1919. That would make him 75 years old right now, the time I'm filming this. But I don't know how long it's going to take me to make this film, and I don't know when you're watching it, so I can't tell you how old he is right now where you are. I can't even tell you whether he's alive or not. Who knows, I could be dead by now. At least we know you're not dead. Not yet anyway. But it's going to happen to you too.
Wow. Deep.
Let's do it this way. If I'm dead, I'll have who's ever showing this film insert a written message across the screen telling you the date that I died. That way, if I'm dead, you can have that eerie feeling you get when you realize the person you're watching had no idea his end was coming so soon. Okay? Here we go.
Okay, wait. Look, all I was trying to do was to show the difference between my generation and my father's generation. His was all about gratitude, kindness, humility. And mine, well, pretty sarcastic.
Let's take a boat to Bermuda. Let's take a plane to St. Paul. Let's take a kayak to Quincy or Nyack. Let's get away from it all. Let's take a trip in a trailer. No need to come back at all. Let's take a powder to Boston for charter. Let's get away from it all. No place like home, sweet home. It's a charming thought and pure. But until the world belongs, how can we be sure? Off to Niagara, next time we're digging the falls. Yes, we're leaving. We're hitting the road, oh, we're leaving. We're hitting the road, yes, we're leaving. We're hitting the road, oh, we're getting away from it all.
I had no idea that making a film would be this complicated.
This is me at 33. Now here I was trying to convey why I felt compelled to make this documentary. Again, in my new, innovative, self-centered style.
I guess I'm a dreamer. I have a great fantasy life. In my mind, I've actually convinced myself that, given the right opportunity, I'd transform into a creative genius and that everyone would love and admire my work. Except, of course, a few critics that would slander me in a thinly veiled attempt to justify their otherwise pathetic lives. I believe there comes a time in everyone's life when one must either give up one's secret dreams and desires or desperately try to achieve some measure of success towards them. For me, that moment came while staring out the third-floor window of a rundown hotel room in Amsterdam.
No, I don't.
My wife and I had traveled to Europe with my parents, my brother Wayne and his wife, to stand on the soil where my father's B-24 bomber, the Boomerang, had been shot down in Holland exactly 50 years before. Have a good time? Growing up, Dad never really talked about the war. If you asked him about it, he would answer your questions, but then change the subject. Over the years, I had asked enough questions to get a rough idea about what happened, but then something remarkable happened. When the 50th anniversary approached, Dad began to talk. Not only Dad, but many of his old crew members began contacting him too. There were telephone calls, letters, books, newsletters. After 50 years of repressed memories, it was time to talk. Now you have to understand that going to Europe was not my dad's style. Growing up, our family vacations consisted of visiting our relatives in Idaho and sleeping on their floor. To Dad, money is something to be saved, not spent. But the excitement of this reunion was too much even for Dad.
I thought the idea of a reunion back at the crash site in the Netherlands was a wonderful idea. And I told Ernie that I was ready to go, even though it was going to be expensive. And it was expensive.
Now, unlike my father, I didn't live through the Depression, so I'm always looking for a way to blow my money. So in May of 1994, we flew to London and rendezvoused with two other Boomerang crew members. First, we met the Boomerang's navigator, Ernie Gavitt. Ernie came with his wife, Arlene, and grandson, Doug.
Are you lost?
Hey, what do you say, young man? How you doing? Good to see you. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Pilot the navigator.
Next, we met the Boomerang's radio operator, Don Pierce, and his wife, Doris. From London, we went north to Norwich, where we met a number of English World War II buffs who were kind enough to take us to visit the former North Pickenham Air Base, where the Boomerang had been stationed. The base is now a turkey farm with sheds built up and down the runways. But many of the old buildings are still there today.
It looks like it's in pretty good shape.
There's the crank.
There it is. Shall we try to get her going?
Okay, try it, Wayne.
Okay, ready? I think that's
Still got the bloody original balloon tires on it and all.
A lot of the children, I was one of them, that were about 7 or 8 at the time, remember the Americans, and were offered, we call them sweets, you call them candy, such things as chewing gum. We'd never heard of chewing gum before. Fruit, bananas, we'd never seen a banana in our lives. And a lot of them would adopt a particular aircraft, and they would see it go out, and they would be back when it came in. Hopefully it would come back.
We take great pleasure to lay this wreath on the memorial in memory of all the lads from the 496 who never returned.
Thank you.
From Norwich, we flew a small commercial airliner over the channel to Holland. Over the same channel that the Boomerang had flown 50 years before. By this time, I had worked myself up into a historical frenzy. Meeting the people, seeing the places, reading the stories. It all touched me very deeply, made the whole thing seem vividly real. Like a new convert to a fanatical religion, I had an overwhelming desire to share this story with everyone I met. I was far from home, and there was a lot of excitement, and I began to let my fantasy life take over. I convinced myself that I had to convey to the world the emotion that I was feeling. Ignoring all rational thought, I got on the phone and contacted a local news affiliate. And for 2,200 guilders, Hans and Jasper came out to film the festivities, marking 50 years from the date of the crash. Well, that was well over a year ago, and I'm still having a difficult time putting this whole film together. See, the problem is, I'm both a perfectionist and a procrastinator. I want everything to be perfect, so I put everything off for a time when I'm perfect. But that's not working very good. Well, very well.
I can't get enough of my man, and he's got a lot to give. Stupendous, prodigious, he's larger than life. I'm gonna keep him for as long as he lives. 'Cause he's my chubby hubby. Man, I love his shape and size. Yeah, he's my chubby hubby. Extra chin and thunder thighs. Well, he ain't beady or thin, and he ain't scrawny or slight. I mean, his measure in width exceeds his measure in height. Yeah, he's my chubby hubby. My chunky pudgy baby of love. So keep your Tarzan and Adonis with a figure so lean. I like a man who has to wear a pair of extra large jeans. Chubby hubby, my chunky pudgy baby of love. Oh yeah, my chunky pudgy baby of love. Oh yes he is. Girl, you have never seen a man like my man. He puts his arms around me and I just love hugging all that. Ooh, lots of body, baby. Get on over here, my chubby hubby.
No, I was gonna... Oh, you know, I'm gonna have to call you back. Bye. Can I help you?
Yes, I'd like to see Dr. Thomas.
Do you have an appointment?
No, it's kind of an emergency.
Let me guess. Diet pills?
Yes.
Fill this out. I'll get you right in.
My father, Charles Wallace Arnett, was born in Franklin, Arizona on September 5th, 1919. Franklin is a suburb of Duncan, Arizona, and Duncan is just about as far away from anything that there is. It sits on the border between Arizona and New Mexico, and it's literally a 4-hour drive to any real civilization. To give you some idea of how small Duncan was, my dad played on the Duncan High School football team, marched in the marching band during halftime, and sold concessions before and after the game. Look, I didn't want to mention religion, but I have to. It would be impossible for me to talk about my dad without mentioning his religion. I know religion is a taboo subject, and there seems to be this unwritten rule in film that we have to ignore religion and pretend it doesn't exist. Actually, there's more. I'm also compelled to tell you that we're Mormons. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not that I'm embarrassed to be a Mormon. It just always requires a lot of explaining. Believe me, I know. I spent 2 years with a white shirt and tie on, riding around on a bicycle trying to explain it to people. But the reason I mention religion is that it had a profound effect on my father. Now, don't get me wrong, my dad isn't real preachy or pious, he's just good. Now, you probably think I'm just being biased, but trust me, I'm the kind of person that loves to make fun of other people's faults. It's one of my hobbies. In fact, I was sincerely hoping that by going to Europe and meeting the other crew members that I could dig up some dirt on my dad. You know, something I could give him a hard time about. He was only 25 years old when he went into the service. How mature could he have been?
And it was always calming to me as a young man to know that my friend Charles Arnett was at the controls, because he was one damn good pilot. And I honestly can't remember anything which would be in a negative sense.
Well, I heard you use the word "damn" there, Ernie, and that's one I've never heard my dad say.
Well,
Now, did you ever hear my dad
Never.
No?
Never. I can't ever remember him, not only not ever saying "damn," but I can't ever remember him being upset or being angry. It was just a very warm, calming atmosphere when your dad was around, and we were buddies, your dad and I, because he didn't drink or smoke, and nor did I.
He just, he didn't drink, he didn't cuss, didn't smoke like everybody else did, and was a real straight shooter, a real leader, and took his position as a pilot seriously. Made sure that everybody was getting their training, doing what they were supposed to do. But as far as I know, I never heard him cuss ever in the time we were in training.
And how about you? Did you do a little cussing?
Oh, I'd cuss, drink, anything I could. Most of the other guys did.
After high school and a year of college, Dad accepted a calling to serve as a missionary for the Mormon Church in Australia. You know, riding around on a bicycle in a white shirt and tie, trying to explain it to people. After 2 years as a missionary, Dad was ready to come home, but as he was about to learn, he wouldn't be home for long.
The very day I was released from my mission, we got word that the Japanese had bombed Pearl Harbor. I knew then that I'd be going in the military as soon as I got home.
Pearl Harbor, December the 7th, 1941.
Anything else you want to get? Do my eyebrows or anything?
Yes, I will.
I'm tearing up here. Oh gosh, I cannot believe you're doing this. I gotta look
There.
Do I look thinner? Because I'm thinking, I tried to lose, I've lost 25 pounds on these things. And I'm just really proud of that. Only I'm just thinking, no one's going to notice because it's because I'm still fat. In fact, I'm down to the weight that I used to be depressed at. And now I'm real happy because it's
Okay.
I'm sorry.
There you go.
Now, Dad supported the war. Everyone did, including the Mormon Church. On the other hand, Dad had just finished serving a 2-year mission teaching the gospel of love, and he wasn't in any particular mood to pick up a gun and shoot someone. You also have to remember that my dad didn't have the benefit of television and video games like we have today to precondition him towards violence and inhumanity. He decided that he would rather support the war by getting a job at home that was vital to the war effort. It's the best he could do. It's not like his dad was influential and could get him into the National Guard or anything. I don't know, that was a little rude, wasn't it? Dad was able to get work at the copper mine in Morenci, Arizona, but his specific job wouldn't exempt him from the service. When he got his draft notice, he went to his supervisor one last time to see if he could get an exempt job as a crane operator.
And he came back and said there wasn't anything he could do. And so I checked out and went home. I decided I'd spend time with my family. And then I learned later that about 30 minutes later, he came back and said that he could get me the job that would exempt me. So I almost didn't get to go in the military.
Just think, if Dad had just waited around until the end of the day, I'd be doing a movie on World War II copper mining, the key to victory.
When I arrived at the induction center in Phoenix, there were a lot of civilians hanging around there, and they're making comments like, kill one of those Japs for me, or kill one of those Germans for me. I didn't know how I was going to feel about actually having to kill somebody. This was a tremendous adjustment for me.
But something happened to my father after he joined the service. And despite all my research, I really don't understand how they did it. But he changed.
After taking a bunch of tests, I was fortunate enough to be assigned to the Army Air Corps.
At first, my dad was assigned as an airplane mechanic. It was a relatively safe job, probably safer than the copper mine. He'd be stationed on an air base on Allied soil. It was great. He landed an interesting, safe, cushy job.
Then they came around and suggested that we might become aerial engineers. That means that we would have some responsibility on the ground for the aircraft, but we'd also know gunnery and would be flying in combat missions. Now, this became very tempting in a way because it looks like it was going to be a lot of fun and you're exercising your patriotic duty at the same time.
Fun? Was he crazy? Volunteer to fly over Nazi Germany in a plane hurriedly made out of bolts and thin sheet metal? Dad, stay back at the base!
Then I got to thinking about that and thought, well, I might as well see if I can go to cadet school and learn how to fly, and then I can drive and ride in the front instead of riding in the back.
Are you catching on to what just happened here? The same guy who was trying to dodge the draft a few weeks before is now volunteering to go into combat. And what makes this even more amazing when you realize just how dangerous these missions really were going to be. The odds of successfully completing the 25 missions required before discharge were dismal at best. Even those that did complete their 25 missions were asked to sign up again for an additional 5, and then another 5. In essence, you kept flying over Germany until they shot you down. And it usually didn't take long for the Germans to shoot you down either. Of the 72 planes in my dad's bomber group, 54 would be lost within the first 3 months of operations alone. You see, this wasn't like the Gulf War where our Air Force completely outclassed the other side. The Germans had better airplanes than we did. The phrase German engineering wasn't just good marketing. The Germans were vastly superior in the air. America's strength was in its ability to produce a larger number of inferior planes and talk a bunch of young farm boys like my dad into thinking that it would be fun to fly them. I just don't get it. Those diet pills, they can kill you. Dad was transferred to Indianapolis, where he met Wayne Stewart, another Mormon boy training to be a B-24 pilot.
Wayne Stewart became the best friend that I had. He was a member of the church, and when we went to Freeman Field, just south of Indianapolis, then when Sunday came, we went in to look up the church. And that's where I met your mom.
I almost forgot about Mom. Anna Laureen Lillianquist, spelled Liljanquist, but pronounced Lillianquist. I only learned that after the bank refused to cash my check because I couldn't spell my mother's maiden name. Mom was born and raised in Sunnydale, Idaho, a suburb of Rexburg, Idaho. To give you some idea of the size of Sunnydale, here's Mom and her entire 8th grade graduating class. Mom was a senior in high school when the United States entered the war.
Well, for one thing, all of the eligible men just simply disappeared. Looked like it was going to be a very boring summer.
Sounds like a formula for success. Mom was bored and Dad had been starved for female attention for over 2 years. The only thing left to do now was to get the two of them together.
And then my brother transferred to Indianapolis, Indiana, and I went along. And I'm glad I did, because it was there that I met your father.
The missionaries had promised they were going to get us an invitation to dinner.
They took me to one side and said, "Look, you've got to take these Air Cadets home for dinner." I said, "I can't. My sister-in-law is sick."
And she was kind of in a bind. So we decided that we'd take her out.
So they took me out for hamburgers.
And I think we had chicken in a basket.
I have a picture of them we took that day. I felt so lucky. 2 men when they were so scarce, and handsome ones too. Oh, they looked so wonderful in their uniform. Air Cadets dressed nicer than the regular GIs.
We spent the whole afternoon together. And I discovered that she was very friendly, but she is also very attractive.
He asked me to write to him, and I said, "Of course." I answer every letter I get the very same evening. I even post it then. And when he did write, he said, "I expect an answer tonight." And he got one. We had quite a hot correspondence going, maybe 3 letters a week. The next Saturday was the 24th of July, and we had a big dance at our chapel.
And I'm not much of a dancer, but we had fun.
Afterwards, all the young people there got in 2 cars and went for sodas. I couldn't finish all of my milkshake, and I had to give the rest of it to Charles. And he told me later it was right then and there that he decided to marry me. I'm afraid I fooled him, though, because now I can finish mine and his, too.
After the dance, we went out to catch the streetcar to go home.
We just barely missed the streetcar, and I said, "Oh, I don't think they run more than once every hour at night." What I didn't realize, that was the last one for the night.
So we sat out there on the curb waiting for a streetcar or a taxi or some way to get home. And we didn't get home till 4 o'clock in the morning. Next weekend, she came down to my graduation where I got my wings and was commissioned a 2nd lieutenant in the United States Air Corps. And she pinned my wings on, and then I gave her a little miniature set and pinned it on her.
Afterwards, we were walking down the street. He's so proudly in his officer's uniform. I was on his right side, and he said, "I think you better get over on the other side. I might have to salute somebody."
Okay, Dad. What I wanted to know is, did you kiss her?
Yeah.
Okay, when was that?
It was at the, when she came down for graduation.
And do you want to tell me any more about that?
No.
When did he first kiss me? Oh, I think it was in the car after that first dance. But the one I really remember was after graduation, and he had come back to Indianapolis and had taken me to work. And there in the stairway in the office building, he gave me a kiss that shook me to the very core. And every time I went up and down those stairs, I remembered that kiss, and I thought, you know, I really like that guy.
Well, that was it. 3 dates, a hamburger, or chicken in a basket if you believe Dad, a milkshake, and at least 1 good kiss. and it was all over. Dad was sent to David Monson Air Force Base in Tucson, Arizona, and Mom was transferred to Washington, D.C.
Well, that was the last thing I narrated before I turned 40. And after that, everything just ground to a halt. It's not that I completely stopped working on the film. I mean, I took 2 more trips back to the National Archives to get more footage, and I bought a whole lot of new gear and software to improve the look and sound of the film. But the real problem was that I had let too much time pass. Now, I heard somewhere that every cell in the human body is completely replaced every 7 years. Now, if that's true, then the Mark that started this project was long gone by now. And the Mark that replaced him? Well, let's just say he didn't share the same vision for this film. Years passed, and every day I would carry the weight of not finishing. And then my daughter Suzanne got married, and I could see that time was not going to wait for me to catch up. I had to do something. So I decided to skip ahead and cut to the heart of the matter. That means I had to abandon the animation sequence and the big musical number. But all you really need to know to understand this next scene is that my father arrived safely in England and completed 2 successful missions over Germany. This is the only scene I ever showed my father.
On the 3rd mission, we got up early like we usually did, about 4 o'clock in the morning, and of course you have to go to breakfast and go through a briefing. And our mission for that day was Brunswick, which meant it was kind of deep into Germany.
This group of buildings here is your target. This building will be the aiming point.
My crew members, after the first mission, had come to me and asked if we could kneel down and have prayer under the wing of the airplane before we went. And that was certainly all right with me. And we did that on the 2nd mission. And on the 3rd one, we knelt down there to have prayer. And I began to pray, and of course the thing that concerns you at a time like that is what to pray for, and you want to pray that you'll have a successful mission, that you'll accomplish the things that you've been trained to do, and that you will go and come safely. When I prayed for returning in safety, I immediately knew that we were not coming back. That knowledge was just literally poured out upon me, and there was no uncertainty about it. We were not coming back. I was shocked. I was stunned. I didn't know what to do. I'm sure there must have been a long pause before I finally somehow completed that prayer and got up. I didn't want to go. But yet I knew that there wasn't any honorable way out. We'd already checked the aircraft over. It just checked out perfectly. I had the crew check it out again. Make sure that everything is proper, that the bombs are loaded proper, they're armed, or that see if you can find something. But everything checked out wonderful, just perfect, no flaws. So there wasn't anything to do but get into the airplane and go.
Perimeters of 20-odd fields of the 8th Air Force, more than 400 forts and liberators, with their 4,000 crew members, taxi for the takeoff.
36 ships from our group up that morning. And so it takes a couple of hours by the time you take off and climb up and find your group and get assembled with them before you actually head out over the English Channel towards Germany. So I struggled with this for quite a while, all this time, just looking for a way not to go. And then I finally remembered that Jesus Christ, the Savior of the world, he knew that he was going to be crucified. And when he went into the Garden of Gethsemane and prayed, he prayed to Heavenly Father that if it be possible to let this cup pass from him. Then he said, nevertheless, not my will, but thy will be done. And I thought if Jesus could do that and suffer the things that he had to suffer, then I should be willing to take whatever comes, whatever the Lord has in store for me. So from that point, I experienced a great deal of peacefulness and calmness came over me, and I didn't worry anymore. We just went about our business on that mission.
Unsere Jagd- und Zerstörerverbände unmittelbar vor dem Start. Deutscher Verband im Anflug auf den Feind.
Then suddenly, right dead ahead, it appeared to be about 40 Me-109 German aircraft came right directly toward us, and they came fast, and they fired. And instantly, planes on either side of me just veered off a little bit, and they were in flames from the nose to the tail. Then they suddenly just exploded. And it was a shocking experience. I still get emotional about this after all of these years. This was such a shocking experience to see friends of mine, people that I knew and had trained with, just suddenly disappeared, just disintegrated. Now, they shot down 8 airplanes of ours that day, so there were like 40 or 50 men that were just suddenly, instantly killed. My own airplane was hit. 2 engines were hit, and they quit immediately. Then one of the vertical fins and rudders was damaged, and another engine was hit and still running, but it was leaking oil. Well, we knew that we could never make it to the target. I turned off, left the formation, dropped down to a lower altitude, and the navigator gave me a heading for home. We threw out our flak suits. We threw out everything that was loose to make the airplane as light as possible. And of course, the first thing we did was salvo all the bombs. Just pulled the lever and they went, and I have no idea where they hit. And we got clear back to Holland. Got back to the coast of Holland, and things were going pretty well. We were maintaining altitude, and we were heading home. And the thoughts crossed my mind that, well, we weren't coming back, but we were going to get mighty close, because all we had to do was go across the English Channel. But the English Channel at that latitude was like 100 miles, so we still had quite a ways to go. And just as we got out over the water, the damaged engine that was leaking oil suddenly quit and caught on fire. It was then that I knew that we weren't going to make it across the channel. So I had a decision to make, whether to go straight ahead and ditch it in the channel, or whether to turn it around and see if we could get back over the land high enough to bail out. The day before, they had read us statistics on the average floating time of a B-24 that ditched in the ocean. The average floating time was 11 seconds. I thought that was a little short. My co-pilot and I decided we would turn that thing around, get back over land high enough to bail out. So we gingerly, on one engine now, turned it around and got it back over the land, but we were losing altitude. And by the time we got back over the land, we were down so low, and the aircraft was unstable enough that there was no way that I could get out, or the co-pilot. It took us both to maintain that airplane. But we called the crew and told them that we were going to stay with the aircraft and ride it to the ground. We gave them the option of either bailing out, and if they bailed out, they needed to go now, immediately. Or they could take their crash land position and we would all ride it to the ground together. They all elected to take their crash land position, and I prayed again to Heavenly Father that if it were possible that I wanted to remain alive, that I wanted a posterity, that I wanted to live. And then I thought about that little girl back in Indianapolis who had pinned my wings on. And I was at peace and calm as we continued on down. Picked out a tulip field to set that thing down in, but the only problem was in Holland, those big canals that just crisscross running both directions. There's no way to avoid them. I lowered the landing gear of the aircraft, and it touched down briefly and then come to a canal. And then I had enough flying speed at that point that I could pull back on the stick, and it skipped that first canal. And skipped over that one, and it rolled along then on the landing gear until it come to the next canal. It had lost any flying speed, and so it sheared off all the landing gear and slid along on its belly till it stopped short just a little bit before the next canal.
I'm working in the Tulps, 4 kilometer van de crashplaats. Ja, ik hoorde schieten in het westen, bij de coast, bij de Germans, Duitsers.
Ja, en toen werden ze naar binnen gebracht.
Then all the crew was brought into the house, and one of them was laid in bed.
Timmerman geen verfje over die kist gedaan had.
Ik vertel dat even, mama. Ik vertel het. She said she saw that the deceased was put in a coffin, and the coffin was not painted. And she cried for that, and she cried for his mother, who would never see him again. She remembers giving one of you a handkerchief because one of you was crying. And she handed over a handkerchief, and she remembers that you didn't talk, not at all, but she remembers the person saying thank you. But she said they didn't say a word. Nobody said a word except when praying, but not talking. You didn't talk to the people, not to the doctor, not to anybody.
So I entered the room and saw the Americans on their knees praying. So I tried to communicate with the airmen, the Americans, but did not flourish.
Van mijn man geweest.
The blade who found.
Ja.
My father found the blade. His brother,
Zijn broer,
my father's brother, had taken the blade of the land where the plane crashed. They were afraid the Germans would find it, so after the war they picked it up out of the water, and then my father put it for the house.
Where's the bullet hole?
It's on the back side, Ernie.
Look at this.
And that's there what it looks like.
Right. Imagine that. You see that, Doug?
Yes.
Huh? Unbelievable.
When the Boomerang crashed, the German soldiers who captured the surviving crew members took pictures of the plane. And then that night, the Germans went out and celebrated at a local pub. And the pub owner got them really drunk and then stole the film. When we returned for the 50-year reunion, Dad was presented with these stolen photographs. These are the actual photos of my dad's crash. And on this trip, I also learned for the first time what my father really faced. The Army's casualty rate in World War II was 2.4%. The Marines, 2.9%. The casualty rate of my dad's bomber group, 44.2% killed in action. Getting shot down probably saved my dad's life. But my dad's best friend, Wayne Stewart, or Stu as they called him, was not so lucky. So I hope you can see what this trip did for me and why I had to tell this story. And now, the conclusion of Baby Boomerang.
I came home from work, and there were 2 letters for me. I want to inform you that we got word that Charles is missing in action. It was kind of hard to read the letter from him, from England. He said he had flown 2 bombing missions. He'd even gone over to see Stu. He was looking forward to finishing his missions and coming home. It wasn't until August that I found out that Charles was even alive and a prisoner of war.
After a couple of days at the interrogation center, then we were taken to the permanent camp, Stalag Luft 3.
And from then on, until he was liberated, I tried to send a letter every day.
She didn't get all of my letters, and I didn't get all of hers, but her letters were treasured. But we were moved out of there at about 10 o'clock at night. Just picked up whatever we could carry with us, and we started walking. And we walked in the snow. The snow was about a foot deep, and the wind was blowing, and it was just bitter cold. So a lot of us suffered from frostbite, and we walked all that night, all the next day, and all the next night with just little 5 or 10 minute rest spells. We didn't know what our objective was. We didn't know that we were going to Springburg and then be put on the train. They didn't tell us that. And then we were put into this camp, which had been, formerly they had told us, had been a concentration camp. And I don't know where they moved the people to that were formerly there, but they weren't there anymore, but they didn't take everything with them because they left some rats and lice and ticks and fleas. That was the place where we were most concerned about something to eat. They only fed us about 3/4 of a cup of dehydrated vegetable soup twice a day. Oh, we got hungry. All we could talk about, all we could think about was something to eat. just constantly. And we made out elaborate menus of food that we remembered that we liked and what we were going to have when we got home. It's just amazing to me that you can't think about anything else. Even those boys who spoke very crude and rough and used bad language, that ceased when they got hungry. All they could talk about was beautiful, pleasant food. We went south to a place called Mooseburg. They had over 100,000 prisoners of war that they'd brought in from other prison camps all over Germany. We had the Red Cross packages, so we had plenty to eat. We didn't have buildings for us when we got there, so they put up some tents. And then one morning, rifle fire started. In came a big tank and just mashed down the barbed wire fence to the prison camp. And not far behind that was General George Patton. And then we knew the war was over when the Nazi flag came down and the American flag went up. And then the roar of 100,000 prisoners let out a war whoop that they could hear all around the world. We knew then that we had been liberated. It took about 4 or 5 days to cross the Atlantic, but then we went right into the harbor at New York, right by the Statue of Liberty. There were more cheers and tears as we passed by the Statue of Liberty because we knew from experience freedom, what freedom meant. I just felt free all over, free as a lark. Oh, it just felt so free. I just ran out in the field, out in the alfalfa field. I'd never seen the alfalfa field look so green. I looked up at the sky. I'd never seen that sky look so blue. And the puffy white clouds. I laid down just sprawled out in the alfalfa field. I looked up at the sky and I laid there for 2 or 3 hours, just savoring the freedom.
It was real exciting to find that Charles was actually back in the States and liberated.
Then I wrote her a letter and told her that I'd like to come up and visit her.
And the second letter says, well, he was going to wait until his brother got home, and then he'd come up and see me. And the third letter, he didn't even talk about coming up and seeing me at all. He proposed that we get married in 10 days from then.
I called her up and she said yes, and she got on a bus and came down to Arizona.
And I thought, what'll I say when I get there? What'll I do? Will I even recognize him?
Well, I hadn't seen her for quite a while, and I wondered whether she had changed or whether I might not recognize her immediately.
But when I got off the bus and there he was, I just kind of fell down into his arms and everything seemed just exactly right. And 3 days later, in the Arizona temple, we were married for time and eternity. And I've never been sorry.
And we lived happily ever after.
I started off this documentary, wanted to show how different I was from my father. And then I reached the age my father was when I started forming memories of him. And I realized we're not as different as I once thought. Now I tend to put more value on gratitude, kindness, humility. But sarcasm? That's going to be difficult to give up. I love you, Dad. Thanks.
You're riding high on Monday, shot down in May, but just roll myself up in a big ball and fly.
I'm happy. That's a word I haven't used in a while. But I'm happy ever since the day you looked at me and smiled. I don't wanna sound crazy, but I'm thinking maybe this is the way it's supposed to be. I don't want to overdo it, but darling, I knew it the way you looked at me and said, "You're lovely." That's a compliment I haven't received in a while. But I'm lovely. Coming from your lips makes everything worthwhile. I don't want to sound foolish, but I'm thinking you wish this is the way it'll always be. I don't want to dive too far, but darling, where you are is exactly the place I'd like to be. I love you. Those are words that are hard to say sometimes.